This week on Make Better Wealth Decisions, we're going to be talking to one of the real pioneers of behavioral economics, one of the people that was there from the beginning, an OG, if you will. We're going to be talking about how people can make better wealth decisions on a holistic basis and how you need to think about money as a tool to navigate your life and how to think about things in a comprehensive way so that it's not just all save and all spend. Stick around.
Make Better Wealth Decisions, a podcast that explores how financial advisors' blind spots can harm your investments. I'm your host, John DeGuy, a portfolio manager with Design Securities in Toronto. In this podcast, we'll provide advice on how you can achieve better outcomes by maximizing investments and minimizing taxes. Let's put our thinking caps on as we consciously decide to get smarter about our money.
Welcome to Make Better Wealth Decisions. My guest this week is Meir Statman. He is the Glenn Klimek Professor of Finance at Santa Clara University in California. His research focuses on behavioral finance, and he attempts to understand how investors and managers make wealth decisions and how they can do it in a way that helps them to reflect upon capital markets and how things work. His latest book, A Wealth of Well-Being, A Holistic Approach to Behavioral Finance, came out earlier this year with Wiley Publishers. Mayor, welcome.
I'm delighted to be with you, John.
You're one of the most respected and well-established academics in all of behavioral economics. What got you interested in the first place way back when?
Well, I've always been interested in how people behave, my own behavior and the behavior of others. Early on in the late 60s, when I studied at the Hebrew University, economics and statistics and finance, it was a time of standard finance where people are described as rational and pretty much set aside, and that all they care about is maximizing their wealth, and they are not subject to cognitive and emotional errors. The ironic thing is that in the building right next to mine worked Kahneman and Tversky, the famous Kahneman and Tversky. It is the psychology building, and I would step in to participate in experiments to earn some pocket money, but I had no idea who they were. I had no idea of their work. None of my professors mentioned it. And it was only later, at the very beginning of the 1980s, that I became aware of their work. And I could see how that work lets me think and write about financial things in a way that reflects actual people and the behavior of normal people.
Now, you've been a professor since how long? When did you become a professor? And you've been at Santa Clara, as far as I know, for pretty much all, if not all, of your career. Is that not correct?
That's about right. Yeah, I started at the very beginning of 1980. I taught a bit before that at the City University of New York while I was finishing my PhD at Columbia. Yeah, but my career has been at Santa Clara. And you could say, geez, so you've been doing the same thing. Yes and no. I've been a professor, but I really participated in the change in finance during that period. And my work has been far from routine or boring.
So let's get into decision making. I wanted to begin just by sort of getting the people to know a little bit about the previous book of yours that I'm familiar with, which is What Investors Really Want. And it came out, I don't know, 20 years ago. I don't know how long ago.
More like 14. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Anyway, I read it when it came out. It was fascinating. And as a person who helps people with their financial decision making, I'm obviously very curious to know what it is that investors really want because I want to help give it to them. Could you maybe take just 2 or 3 minutes to summarize your previous book before we get into your new one?
So the point was that when you ask people, what do you want from your investments? But there is more to what people want from their investments than making money. For example, for some people, the desire not to pay taxes is so strong, they are willing to burn $2 just so that they don't have to send $1 to the government. people are reluctant to realize losses because when they realize losses, they feel that this is when they actually kiss the money goodbye. And so they are willing to really pay more in taxes, because if you realize losses, you can get a deduction from taxes so that they don't have to suffer that pain of regret. People care about status, about social status, and so they invest in hedge funds that cost plenty and supposedly give you higher returns and lower risk, which they do none of, instead of just low-cost index funds, for example, and so on. And I can go on and on about what it is that people want. Essentially, what people want is to enhance their well-being. Money, of course, underlies it. But for example, minimizing regret enhances well-being. And so people are willing to give up the utilitarian benefits of returns for those expressive and emotional benefits of avoiding the pain of regret.
I think that's a really good jumping off point to move to your most recent book. When you start thinking about wealth and well-being and taking a behavioral approach to a holistic view of your wealth and well-being, it seems as though you're taking the themes that you have in what investors really want and maybe fleshing them out a bit more. And increasingly, there are a number of people that are doing this. I know Daniel Crosby's new book also talks about this. They might be called soft issues, the sorts of things that give us some peace of mind, that make us feel comfortable and content, even though they don't necessarily show up on a statement. So maybe I could ask you to touch on what you would say are 3 or 4 of the main themes of your new book now.
So the idea is that we need to expand the circle of finance from just maximizing wealth and having errors made on the way to do that, to really say, what is it that people want? And what people want really is to enhance their well-being. And of course, you need money, you need financial well-being for life well-being, but life well-being is not financial well-being. And so you have to consider things that are obvious to everyone. You have to consider family, and with that, you have to consider marriage and children and grandchildren and divorce and so on. You have to consider friends. You have to consider health. You have to consider work and religion and society and everything else in between. All of them, more than interface with finance, they're really built on finance, but they really are beyond finance. And if we are going to end up making better choices, I think, than if we just look at.
I think there's a lot of truth to that. One of the things that a lot of people have been saying is that financial advisors down the road are going to be more like a life coach, and they'll be helping people with their finance and their decision making and mapping things out. But it's almost as though there's a jigsaw puzzle where you're not just dealing with your money, but also, as you say, your family and your spouse and your children, but things like meditation and yoga so that you can clear your mind to make better decisions and be more clear on what your life purpose is. And health in terms of going to the gym and being fit, and the food you eat and being more mindful in those ways. And so these are all the sorts of things that in 2024 are creeping, I find, increasingly into the literature, both in terms of the papers that are coming out that are in academia, but also just in terms of books that you can find where people are starting to realize there are real connections. And we're in a sort of a, what I'd almost want to call it a post-financial world where financial health is, of course, it's about money, but there are so many other things that are now starting to seep into the conversation that people are starting to realize it's more than that. And that makes the jobs of people like myself who give advice to retail clients always fun, always challenging, but it never changes. And it's more holistic, to use your words. Do you have maybe a couple examples of the holistic advice that's being offered and what people can do to make better decisions based on a more holistic approach?
So I've been talking about financial advisors for many years as financial physicians, and in the same sense that you want physicians to be on the frontier of knowledge of medicine, but also to have a good bedside manner. In other words, people, physicians who truly listen to you, empathize with you, read between the lines or between the words, and such that even if the diagnosis is very bad, you leave the office with a sense that you know where you stand, you know the choices, what to do next. And the same applies to financial advisors. I call financial advisors well-being advisors. Now,
Okay.
they're going to say, I am not a psychologist. And I say, you don't have to be a psychologist. You have to just behave as a good friend. And a good friend is somebody you can speak frankly to. You can disclose things that are painful to you. And remember, all of those things have financial implications. So, for example, if you have a disabled child, or if your own marriage is getting to an end, all of that has financial implications. And so it is not just idle curiosity, in the same way that when a physician says that you should take off your shirt, you know that it's not idle curiosity. Physician probably wants to check your skin or your heart or whatever it is that might be a problem. So that really is the essence of it. And so if you look at life in terms of well-being, you can see that decisions, for example, about spending and saving, crucially, of course, affect well-being. And I'll talk about one aspect. Advisors talk all the time about save, but they're not very good at save. Spend, even though they actually say that to many older people. When I speak with advisors, they say, my real problems are with older people who have accumulated way more than they expected. They are accidental millionaires. And now they find it difficult to break the habit of saving and enjoy that spending. And so that is one of the aspects that I speak about in that book. How is it that advisors can help clients figure out what brings them joy? And it varies from person to person. For me, a trip around the world on a cruise is one that I would jump overboard after a few days. But I spend my money on, say, business class airfare because I'm sick and tired of waiting to be upgraded. And I surely am old enough and I am well off enough to pay full fare, and I don't care anymore. And I can see that in others. You know, when my mother-in-law was old, she had a rickety sofa, and her kids said, you have to toss it out and buy a new one. And she said, no. And eventually the kids, my wife and her two brothers, tossed out that sofa and bought a new one. And she smiled and she said, you are dipping into your inheritance. Exactly. That is sometimes what adult children do. I'm sure that this story rings true to many of your listeners, because that is really what is necessary to enhance people's well-being, both the elderly parents and the adult children. And I can go on and on with examples like these.
Yeah. I think your example is well taken. As a general rule, obviously there are exceptions, but my sense is that the generation that's, let's say, in their mid-70s or older, that have in fact accumulated wealth, they're just genetically predisposed to be frugal, and there's nothing you can do. No amount of prodding and encouraging will get them to spend the money that they've worked so hard to accumulate, sometimes accidentally, as you say. And partially it's just a question of they spent 75 years being frugal, and it's part of their identity. And they don't want to change who they think they are, because they've spent 75 years saying, I was born during a war and I've grown up having to sacrifice. And The irony of this, of course, is that a lot of their kids and grandkids have had it almost too easy and are not frugal enough. And so the pendulum seems to have swung over a couple of generations. And it would be really nice if we could find a way to level the playing field, to get the people that are wealthy to be a little more, who are older to be a little more profligate and to spend a bit more to open up, and to get the people that are younger to be a little more concerned about tomorrow, because a lot of what they do is just living for the day, and they don't really contemplate their lifestyle because they just think, as you say, oh, but I'm going to be getting an inheritance in due course. So as long as I can live high on the hog while my parents or grandparents or benefactors are alive, then my lifestyle will be great when they're alive. And then, of course, when they pass away, I'll get my share of the inheritance and the gravy train will continue. And so a lot of people, I think I'm getting the sense right now that the notion of wealth accumulation has been watered down over the past generation or two, almost because we as a society in the Western world, in North America and Western Europe and Australia and Japan, have almost been too successful in amassing wealth among ordinary, what would otherwise be called middle, or was I just being too generic there?
I think my perspective is actually quite different.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think that the younger generation is as responsible as the older one, but they just live in a more difficult time. You can say that it is difficult in the sense that, say, incomes early on are not going as high, that they are squeezed. And the point is that young people really need help when they are young. So when Nava, my wife, and I were married some 55 years ago, our parents, we were both very young. I was 22 and she was 21. Our parents met and they talked about how much each pair of parents is going to give to the young couple so that they can have a down payment on an apartment. This is when people need money. They need money when they are in their 20s and 30s, not when parents die at 95 and the kids are 65. I find, just looking at my own experience, my own family experience, and speaking with my students, and I think that people are really quite irresponsible. Young people are responsible. When I look at my younger daughter, yes, we gave her a good chunk of money for a down payment, but the house that she bought was old and it needed renovation. She wanted to put in vinyl windows. And I said, no, I think that aluminum clad wood windows are going to be better. And she said, yeah, but vinyl windows cost half of that. So it's not like I'm entitled to the very best, to the contrary. And when we told her that that we are making a donation to the university of several $1 million, and she said, I've already received my inheritance. And she is right, because she got quite a bit of money, as I said, for down payments for the first house and the second house. And so the issue really is that there has to be a balance between saving and spending when you're young and when you're old. My mom would say, spend money, but don't waste it. This is a good rule. It is not don't spend money. It is spending it reasonably. And when you're young, you need money for rent or to buy a house. You need money for a wedding. You need money for paying off student loans and so on. And so I think that this notion that you really have to train kids to save by restricting their money is, I think, counterproductive at the very least. Really help your kids develop a vocation, an interest in life, something that is going to carry them forward, and support them with as much money that is necessary to do that, and within your means, of course, because you too need to retire someday.
Thank you. I'm glad that you disagreed with me on that because I really enjoyed your perspective. And as much as possible, I hope your view is the one that carries the day. I want to have faith in the next generation. And so what you're saying restores my faith in what's to come. What would you say are the biggest challenges people are facing today? And I'm going to ask you that question from two perspectives. One, from the perspective of if you're an investor, what's the biggest challenge if you're an investor? But also, if you're a person like me who's giving advice to investors, what would you say are the biggest challenges for financial advisors who are trying to help people make better wealth decisions?
So from the investors, I think that we want two things in life, with exaggeration, of course. One is not to be poor, and the other is to be rich. Now, I made my money with index funds over more than half a century. Okay. So I can say, if you just put all your money in index funds and just think about the long run, when you're in your 70s, you're going to be as wealthy as I am. But I'm in my 20s and 30s and I can see all my friends buying Bitcoin. What do I do now? You can see that my advice, if it were that advice, is not going to wash. And so I realize that they need both downside protection and upside potential. And so, yeah, put your retirement savings money in, say, in index funds, very widely diversified, low cost. But if you want to buy a Bitcoin, if you want to buy some other speculative investment, I understand. Just don't overdo it. Spend money, but don't waste it again. That really is what is important. And I think that for advisors, it is really important to put themselves in the shoes of their clients. Advisors tend to be people like me, very conscientious, intent on saving, very responsible. If they said that they're going to be there at 10, they get there at 5 minutes to 10 rather than at 10:30. That really is very nice. But as I said before, sometimes that self-control gets to be exaggerated. And so I think that what is necessary for advisors is, yes, there are people who spend too much. Try to get them to spend less. There are people who spend too little. Try to get them to spend more on those things that bring them joy. And advisors are successful at doing just that. It is an effort. I've heard from an advisor who said that a wealthy woman who was living as if she is poor, he finally got her to dip into capital a small amount. And she said, I just had a manicure that I did not have since I was in my 30s. It's crazy. A woman who is saving on taxi and Uber, even though she likes to go to museums. That is crazy. And so you can begin with small amounts. You're not going to take somebody who has been a saver and for whom saving is part of who they are to become free spenders, but you can get them to increase spending just a bit for those things that matter to them.
All right, so we've got to wrap up here. I always like to end with the question that is on everyone's mind. What advice would you give to people to help them make better wealth decisions?
Again, think about your life, your well-being as a portfolio, and that portfolio includes money. Money is really a big chunk of well-being, both on its own. You feel better, you feel more secure when you have more money, and it underlies everything else. You need money for family, you need money for wealth, and so on. But think about it as a portfolio. Not all parts of that portfolio are going to be winners. So in any portfolio, there are losers. And when you speak with clients, you say, that's why they diversify, because we don't know what the losers are going to be ahead of time. The same applies here. You get married. Sometimes the marriage does not work. And you cannot really fix it. Sometimes the best solution is a divorce. you have a disabled child. What do you do? It has, of course, financial aspects to it. The kid is disabled. How is it that you can take resources from where you have it? For example, having good financial well-being to help that kid who is disabled, such that kid is supported even after you are gone. And so this is what I am talking about. I'm talking about the fact that we have life well-being as a portfolio. No portfolio has all winners. And what we need to do is, instead of just working on that part that does not work, say marriage, or on a kid that is disabled that you cannot fix, find way to help and find ways to share it with others. Part of friendship is really that you can speak with them about a disabled child. And it's amazing because we have a disabled child. And when I speak about it with people who are acquaintances, who are colleagues, invariably they tell me about something in their family. It might not be a disabled child. It might be something else altogether. It might be an illness. It might be something that has to do with a divorce, theirs or a child. But by doing that, you enhance your own life well-being because you share your burdens, and then you give them permission to share theirs, and they increase their own life well-being.
Perfect. Thank you, Meir. I want to encourage people to run out and get a copy of A Wealth of Well-Being, a holistic approach to behavioral finance, which came out this year from Wiley. And I want to thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much, John. Always good to speak with you, and I hope that your listeners are going to enjoy.
John DeGooey is a portfolio manager with Design Securities in Toronto. The views expressed in this program are not to be construed as specific advice. It is recommended that you consult a qualified advisor before taking action. His books, The Professional Financial Advisor 4, Stand Up to the Financial Services Industry, and Bullshift are available through Amazon and in bookstores throughout Canada. You can reach John at 647-STAND-UP. That's 647-782-6387, or at jdegooey@designedsecurities.ca.